What about this idea that, and I was just trying to pull together this philosophy as I was thinking about my own objections or concerns. We have these receptors, we have oxytocin, we have dopamine, we have, all these good things that you feel at the appropriate moment.
Yeah.
You have sex, in an orgasm, you get this rush of dopamine. And you would think that's evolutionary built in because evolution wants us to propagate our DNA. So it wants to give us positive reinforcers. So if we have the right behavior, you get the right positive reinforcer. So if you have sex, which spreads your DNA, which helps populate the species, then you get the positive dopamine, oxytocin kind of thing. If you fall in love, you get the positive things because you want, healthy relationships and healthy families raising kids.
Yeah.
If you exercise, you get the right kind of chemicals. If you eat the right foods, you get the right types of chemicals. So yes, your brain, all these drugs act on a system that exists within you, but in a natural course of life, those good feelings get invoked when you do the right behaviors, right?
Yeah.
When you take drugs, it's sort of like you're pulling the lever on those positive feelings without doing the positive behaviors that you should be engaging in, right? So instead of falling in love and having a wonderful family where you earn those good feelings, you just take the drugs and get the good feelings. So what about sort of the idea that anytime you're self-medicating, anytime you're trying to get those good feelings without earning them in the evolutionarily productive way, you're short-circuiting the system and potentially doing damage.
We are always on drugs, 24 hours of every day. The premise of your question, I would disagree with. What I mean by that is there are certain chemicals in our body, serotonin, dopamine being good examples of those, are very similar to the chemicals that we derive from everything we put in our body. Food, drink, medicines, etc. It is impossible to pick a moment in time, John, when your body hasn't been on those drugs. Here's the problem. We call them drugs. We don't understand them for the chemical compounds they are and how they interact with our body. Now, I'm not saying we should use cannabis recklessly all the time, but we just need to understand that it isn't as if we have to earn the right to use these products. These products, when used responsibly at the right time and the right dose and the right setting, can be very helpful, even if we consider them to be exogenous. They're coming from outside of our body. And so I would disagree with how that whole question is characterized because we are already doing that all day, every day. You know the worst drug we put in our bodies every day in quantity-wise?
Sugar.
Yes. Sugar is a drug. And guess what? It's way more harmful than a lot of the other things that we label as drugs, right? And we're just now starting to pay attention to that as a society. So I agree with the underlying premise of the question, which is how do we make wise and decisions about the chemicals and the substances we put into our body? I totally am on board with that. But I don't think it's useful to draw the distinction between food and plants and medicine and all these kind of things by mislabeling them and calling them things that are, in my opinion, not accurate. Did that sound really condescending and like a dickish comment?
No, it was good. What about the perception that marijuana makes you lazy? It makes you stoned. It makes you dull. It dulls your intellect. It makes you less productive. That you get kind of addicted to it, and then you're just kind of a burnout wasteoid, dope guy. Like, what about that perception? Like, I can think of like stoners, right? I can think of in high school, I had some super close friends that were like on the debate team, straight A's, really sharp kids. And then they start doing marijuana, and all of a sudden they're like, grades drop, lose their motivation, and they're just kind of burnouts.
And is that a representative sample of everyone that used marijuana at that time in your community?
No, I'm just saying, but what about that as a risk?
Yeah. And my question wasn't meant to be a snide remark. It's just, number one, we need better data, because that anecdotal experience of the stoner on the couch, there is some truth to that, right? Marijuana does make you tired. Okay. It can temporarily kind of lower your motivation. But for other people that we don't hear about or see on the couch, it actually raises their creativity. It enables them to be more productive in their lives. So I just want to make sure we're being fair about how we're characterizing
and it can also
users.
It can temper their anxiety so they're able to function. So it may bring some people down in an unhealthy way, but other people that are too amped up and too jacked up with whatever natural anxiety or disposition they have, it can bring them down to a functional level. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely. And there are 100 people that fit that category for every one guy that's eating Cheetos on the couch, blazed, making us all look bad. Those people exist. We all know one or two, right? But those are not representative of cannabis users. About 15% of the adult population in the United States uses cannabis today. And we're by trivializing the argument to that level, we're ignoring the 99.9% and looking at the 0.1. But that's not to say that in that specific case, that guy or that girl were making bad decisions. That's true. And cannabis probably isn't for them, right? At least not that amount and that quantity in that time. So yes, there's validity to that argument, but no, it is not representative of the people that walk through our doors every day in our stores. It's not why they're there. They're there, to be on this wellness of this spectrum of wellness that could be from the hardcore cancer patient or epileptic patient to somebody who just wants to use a little bit of cannabis and watch the game instead of drinking a beer. A lot fewer calories too.
What about, this is I have a close friend, Kevin, that was a real advocate of cannabis. And he made this point that like no one's ever died, no one's ever overdosed on cannabis. And no one's ever like drunk. And I know there's DUIs under the influence of cannabis, but I've been given the impression that you really don't get people driving more unsafely or like the type of like accidents that are associated with Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Yeah.
You don't have the same sort of impairment. So talk about the safety of marijuana relative to alcohol.
Yeah, sure. A couple of thoughts come to mind. First of all, let's talk about LD50. From your training, I'm sure that every drug has an LD50, a quantity at which consuming it would make it lethal to a human being, right? There is no LD50 for marijuana. There's no quantity at which marijuana will kill you because it doesn't attack, it doesn't shut down our vital organs. It is like ibuprofen in a sense that it kind of blocks our receptors and changes the way our receptors work, but it doesn't actually change physically the way that our vital organs work. So you cannot die from taking marijuana. However, there are people who feel like they're dying because they took too much, and usually that's associated with eating an edible. But so you can overdose, but you cannot die from an overdose, if that makes sense. You can accidentally take too much, and that happens, unfortunately,
it can
all
make you
too
sick,
often.
but not kill you.
Correct. Yeah. It can make you sick, but marijuana cannot kill you in and of itself.
And alcohol and opiates will kill you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've personally known 5 people in my life, not close friends, but friends of the family and people in the community who have died from opioid overdoses. And those are tragic, and those are preventable. And those come from taking the drug, usually, versus a death associated with, cannabis might be somebody was driving while impaired and caused a crash. That's not the drug, it's the behavior that killed that person. And that's unfortunate. And, the people that I know in the marijuana industry really take that seriously because that is a potential negative consequence of the legalization of marijuana. And
it does impair driving, you're saying?
Yes, it does. And let me clarify what I mean by that. Did you ever watch the special Weed by Sanjay Gupta on CNN?
No.
If you haven't, that's a great resource. It's very objective. Dr. Sanjay Gupta was staunchly opposed to marijuana for most of his medical career, and he decided to take a new look at it. And he spent a whole year researching marijuana, all things marijuana. And one of the things they showed on their documentary is they did a driving test where they took a group of people and broke them into categories. They had them, they were never users or rare users of cannabis and frequent users of cannabis, and the same with alcohol. And they broke these people up into these groups. They had them consume alcohol and drive a car on a closed course, and they counted how many cones they hit, how often they went out of bounds, how dangerous they were, and they quantified this. And they did the same thing with marijuana. And what they found was everyone under the influence of alcohol drove poorly when they were drunk across the board. And it was almost a static kind of, everyone was terrible. But for cannabis users, it was very interesting. The people who did not use cannabis often drove pretty poorly, not as bad as the guys who were drunk, but they didn't drive very good. But people who used cannabis and drove while they were high, people who used cannabis regularly, when they were high, they actually drove better than sober people. And so, or as good at. And so the issue with cannabis and driving and doing anything is people who are familiar with the effects and know how to properly dose and properly consume and manage the experience and the effects. Those people are functioning, people that don't have a problem, putting themselves and others in danger for the most part. The newbies, okay, all you people in Utah who are about to start trying this stuff, be careful. Start low, go slow. I was just joking by that. People in Utah are already using cannabis. They're just getting it from Nevada. So, the danger becomes when you're experimenting for the first time. You may not know what to expect. You may not know how to manage the experience, and you could put yourself in precarious situations, again, especially with when you're dealing with edibles.
Really quick, do you get the sense that Nevada is better off? Your role, you're president of the Nevada Dispensary, what is it called?
Yeah, the Nevada Dispensary Association, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you get the sense that those who are trying to look at this objectively, the data objectively, are feeling like Nevada's better off? And if so, how is Nevada better off from legalizing marijuana, both for medicinal purposes but also recreationally?
We're replacing the violent, gun-toting, illegal underground economy with guys like me, with business people. We employ 160 people in our company. We pay taxes. We pay 6 different taxes. Every product we sell in our dispensary is tested by a third-party lab. So we can ensure that everything that's going out to the public and to our patients and our customers is safe. Marijuana is taxed at almost 30% in Nevada, recreational marijuana, and 100% of that money goes to our education system. So we're producing $6 million a month right now in tax revenue for our schools that a year ago was going to drug dealers from California and Mexico. We have seen the disappearance of cartels in states with recreational marijuana, the eventual disappearance. As prices go down, they get squeezed out of the market because our products are safer, better, higher quality. And when they become the same price or less, they're out. Simple economics. We're creating jobs. We're helping people have access to medicines that they didn't have before. We're helping people replace medicines with safer medicines. And we're helping people recreate in a safer way. And so in almost every aspect, I think the community and the state is better off. And that's why you see people like Cory Gardner, a Republican senator from Colorado, who is adamantly opposed to marijuana, who has completely changed his mind and who is now standing up to Jeff Sessions and President Trump saying, guys, you're on the wrong side of this issue. You're on the wrong side of history. we need to protect this industry and help it flourish. A guy who fought against the legalization initiative in Colorado, tooth and nail, is now a proponent. John Boehner, the former leader, Speaker of the House, he's now working for a marijuana company called Acreage, helping them expand, helping to change Republicans' minds, because that's his community. That's where he came from. That's where he can make a difference. A little bit of education goes a long way, and I think the data is very self-evident. I think it very much paints the picture that legalization, both medical and recreational, is good for our society. And guess what? The other benefit is most states who have allowed either the recreational or medical legalization of cannabis have also started funds to help fund people with addiction, with problem. Let's not ignore the fact that some people abuse cannabis. And so let's help treat them too. Let's help them make wise decisions. And those people are going to exist whether or not the industry is legal. But all of the commerce and the money and the tax revenue that's being generated, in my opinion, from what I can tell, is being used to support good programs and progress for the community.
And you mentioned this before, I believe, but doesn't opiate addiction and opiate deaths decrease in states that legalize medical marijuana?
Yeah, that's been shown. The studies have been coming out the last couple of years, and it's not by 1 or 2 percentage points. It's dramatic in some cases, and we're just getting started. So I'm really excited to see how that plays out, as we continue to expand marijuana and embrace it in the country.
Can it be used as a treatment for opiate addiction, sort of as a replacement?
That's a controversial topic, actually. I personally know people who have. Coming off of opioids is one of the most horrific things a person can go through. And, marijuana can help lower the tension, lower the stress, lower the anxiety. But it's very individual. I don't think we're at the point where we can say that across the board it should be used or can be used to get people off of other stronger drugs. But I personally know many people and have heard of many people using it for that purpose.
So let's turn to talking about Utah now and Mormonism as a way to conclude this episode.
Okay.
Did you read the statement made by the Utah Medical Association?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that statement?
It feels like that's coming straight from Temple Square.
What does it say? Tell us what it says.
It basically says there's no proof that marijuana really helps people, and there are other negative unintended consequences of medicinal marijuana. And basically, it's too early. We don't know enough. Let's go slow on this.
And you did admit that we haven't had a lot of research, but that seems like it's a bit of a conundrum. We haven't allowed the research of it, and then those wanting to prohibit it are saying there's not enough research.
That's exactly right. President Obama, before he left office, asked the DEA to reschedule marijuana, at least look at it. And their conclusion after months of careful consideration was, we just don't know enough because it can't be studied. Guess what? You cannot study marijuana when it's a Schedule I. It's a total circular argument. So their argument from the Utah Medical Association, which appears to me to be coming from the church. I mean, this whole, recent law that was passed in marijuana or in Utah allowing people with 6 months or less to live with a terminal disease to use small amounts of marijuana. Have you heard about that? That was, in my opinion, a ruse to be a half measure. I wouldn't even call it a half measure. I would call it a 1/32nd measure of a way to kind of preempt the need for having a full-blown medical marijuana program. I mean, that's good for those people who have 6 months or less to live. But, I mean, who does that really apply to? Is that really serving the needs of the population? And so I hope people see that the church is just wrong. The Mormon Leaks recordings that came out a couple of years ago that showed the brethren talking about marijuana and talked about missing teeth and this grave addiction and all this stuff with regard to marijuana was laughable. They are so out of touch with reality that to think that they could, well, they absolutely have had an influence on Utah's marijuana laws, and that they're continuing to have an influence even as it goes to the ballot, to me is very alarming. It should cause people to wake up and go, what is this really about? What's really at stake here? Even if you don't use, you have no intention of using, that's totally fine. But the benefits are so staggeringly great compared to the negative consequences that this should be a no-brainer decision in Utah and in every state in the country.
Really quick, in Nevada, what happens if a Mormon, or Colorado, what happens if an active devout Mormon uses cannabis either medicinally or recreationally? How is cannabis use being applied to the word of wisdom and temple recommend, worthiness interviews, etc., from what you hear?
From what I hear, there hasn't been an official statement on that, but I've talked to several leaders in the church about that. They've actually approached me in a lot of cases, and we've had these discussions, and I have to give the leadership at the ground level credit for this, okay? They're telling people, from what I can tell, that if you need it medicinally, it's okay. You know, I can't tell you how many deliveries I've made around our neighborhood and with our community for people who want to use marijuana responsibly. And I don't sense that there's a big pushback from the church on that.
Have you ever heard of someone being disciplined
Nope.
for cannabis use?
Nope.
Not at all. So they're letting it happen. They're not adding it. And it's because
Yep.
the word of wisdom is silent on it, right? And the Book of Mormon is silent on
It's
it.
a natural plant. What was that, the second or third day?
Yeah, right. No, I've heard proponents of cannabis who are Mormon actually quote scriptures from the Book of Mormon or the Doctrine and Covenants about herbs, and the herbs are provided to, and they really are interpreting Mormon scripture to be supportive of marijuana use.
It's a natural plant with very few side effects. It's very safe. It's not a cure-all. It should be used responsibly at the right time. But you know what? This whole war on drugs thing has been so overblown and so blown out of proportion and caused so many negative externalities. It's time to wake up and use it properly. Let it be in our stores. Let it be in our community and treat it for what it is. I think that's really the best thing we can do.
But the point I'm trying to get at here is the church is letting members use it medicinally and recreationally all over the United States and world. We know of no instances where anyone's disciplined. So the church isn't opposed to its usage outside of Utah. They're not punishing anyone for it.
That's a good point.
So why are they, any ideas on why they're prohibiting it inside Utah? Do you have a theory?
Why do they hate gay people? I mean, these guys are old and they are out of touch with reality. And that sounds crass and dismissive, but it's true.
But they could send an edict through some new policy, like we'll call it the May 2018 policy, where they tell all bishops, add marijuana use to your temple recommend questions and discipline or excommunicate people who use it. But they haven't.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're damned if they do, damned if they don't, right? I mean, if they come out and make a statement like that, they realize it's not popular opinion. 82% of Americans today favor medical marijuana, and something like 65 or 67% favor legalization. It's never been higher. Pew started tracking that number in the 1960s. It's never been higher. So I don't think the church would really gain a lot of popularity or benefit by taking a hardline stance like that, okay? But I think they would piss off some people, and they would certainly contradict previous teachings and doctrine and opinion by saying, okay, it's now legal. Did God change his mind about marijuana? How do you explain that from a revelatory standpoint? I think it's difficult. So I think PR-wise, they're best just kind of leaving it silent. And it looks to me, from what I can tell, all their dealings on this issue have mostly been kind of behind the scenes. They tanked the last two marijuana bills that have made it through into the legislature. Mark Madsen 2 years ago was very close to getting a medical marijuana bill passed, and they tanked it 2 days before the vote. They came out with that policy. And when you have a 90% of the legislators in Utah are LDS, and the church comes out with a very unambiguous statement, it puts them in a very difficult bind. But I'm, with the recent poll numbers and with the momentum in general in our society, I think it's going to pass. I believe very strongly that it will carry in Utah, and I am excited for Utah to join the club and to see that this is not something we should be afraid of. We should embrace it, treat it for what it is, and handle it responsibly.
So it sounds like you're saying they're opposing it in Utah because they're sort of old and because they can oppose it in Utah.
Well, I kind of feel like the church leaders feel like that's their backyard. You know, it's okay. Well, actually, it's not okay because they came out opposed to the legalization initiative in Nevada. But the sense is, look, this can happen in other states, but Utah's different. We have to be a beacon. We have to be a standard, blah, blah, blah. I'm totally speculating on that, but I assume there's an element of not in our backyard here, even though, as you astutely point out, they're not really cracking down on it from a word of wisdom standpoint throughout the church, at least yet. So that's the only logic that I can come up with. Maybe someone else out there has a better theory.
Kelly wants to know, is there a risk of cancer with smoking marijuana?
The studies have shown no. So there was a 20-year long-term study done in Sweden with military people who use cannabis for many, many years, and they found no increased risk of lung cancer. However, people who do use a lot of cannabis do have a slight increase if they use it, if they smoke it, right? They have problems in their mouth, and I can't remember what all the different illnesses were, but there was some issue where it caused gum disease at a slightly higher rate than average. But lung cancer, no. Tobacco has formaldehyde and a bunch of really nasty chemicals in it. Cannabis, if done the right way, okay, legally tested, doesn't have any of that stuff in it. Shouldn't have any of that stuff. Everything we sell in Nevada is tested for pesticides, mildew, microbials, heavy metals, all these things. So we're ensuring that the products that people buy in dispensaries are safe and no increased chance of lung cancer for people who smoke, even regularly.
Tyler writes, my wife told me just the other day that marijuana is a gateway drug. Is she right? Someone at our child's junior high was there teaching our public school children that it was a gateway drug.
Yeah. No, she's not right. But that's been a very common kind of a theory for a very long time. That's what I was taught as a child. And thankfully, the science is proving that is not correct. But think about this for a second. Think about the idea of an illegal drug, a Schedule I illegal drug in the United States, okay? What type of child or adolescent is going to be drawn to using that drug? Is it possible that person would also be more likely to try other things, right? It's association, but not causation, right? I mean, that has been absolutely debunked, that using cannabis somehow makes it more likely that you would use other harder drugs. There is a correlation because it's been illegal and underground and suppressed and part of the counterculture movement, but it is not correlated. It's not caused by using cannabis. It's absolutely not true.
You almost get the sense that, there's sort of people who experience the world in terms of their level of anxiety and depression and what they experience, pain, whatever. There's sort of a norm.
Yeah.
And then there's people that maybe they have too much anxiety or too much depression or too much pain or whatever it is, and they're just trying to find a way to level to a place of comfort. And so I think, is that kind of what you're saying, that if they don't have cannabis, they may use alcohol, they may use other substances to try and get to a level that feels right to them, but it's wrong to sort of say that marijuana leads to other things.
Absolutely. I believe that 100%. It's a good moderator, right? For conditions that you just described. And it's not just my opinion. One of the ironic things about the whole marijuana issue is that around 2003, our federal government actually patented CBD while it was a Schedule I. You can look up the U.S. patent number. You can read all about it. The National Institute of Health of the United States patented cannabidiol, the second most common property in cannabis, unique to cannabis. And so you have to ask yourself, why would the National Institute of Health patent CBD while it was a Schedule I? And in their patent, they say there was really two reasons: because of its neuroprotective properties and because it is an anti-inflammatory. properties. This isn't THC, this is CBD. There are health benefits. We need to understand them. Many people, including people within the federal government system, know about that, and that's why they patented it. It's one of those real weird ironies that you really can't make up.
So what, I got this word that all the petitions have been submitted for all the different counties, that all the requirements were met for this to be on the ballot in November, but that the church is paying some sort of committee or group to try and twist members' arms and convince them to withdraw their signatures so that enough counties can be decertified so that it can be taken off the ballot.
Yeah.
What do you think about that sort of political behavior?
Well, I think
by a church, by a tax-exempt organization.
Yeah, I heard
in a sovereign state.
I heard the same thing, and it's really subverting the will of the people. It's subverting the will of the people. We beat our chest a lot about the Constitution. We beat our chest a lot about, being civic-minded and engaged in politics. And they read those silly statements every year before an election saying, we encourage you to get out and vote. But what this is, if it is true that they are doing this, goes in direct opposition to the concept of the will of the people and the vote of the people. If there is a mistake in how the signatures are gathered, then fine. Okay, that's fair game. But if these are gathered properly and demonstrate and the will of the people, should absolutely, this kind of subversion shouldn't be allowed, and people need to be called out if that's taking place.
So is there anything you would recommend that Utahns do? Is there anything that can be done?
Yeah, there's a lot that can be done. And I hope, we were a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I know, at least I was at certain points today, but it's a serious issue and it has far-reaching consequences. And I hope people, first and foremost, will just take a moment to kind of learn about the history. Don't take my word for it. Read about it, study prohibition, study why we ended up in this mess. Because it really informs what's happening in the country today. And marijuana in 20 years and 10 years will be so different than how it's viewed today. I just think it's important for people to be educated on that issue and understand where we're coming from. And secondly, I wouldn't feel pressure to vote a certain way just because certain leaders of the church are opposed to it. I mean, why in the world would we single out this issue as being a moral issue regarding our freedom to vote as citizens? Why is this different? Why is this different? Why is there such a strong aversion to this? You have to ask yourself, what is behind that? And the only thing that I can come up with is simply a lack of understanding and a misguided amount of energy and guilt and just misunderstanding this issue and thinking that it is so destructive when in fact it's not. And that needs to change, and it's a healthy part of our progress as a society.
And also for the tens of thousands of believing Mormons that do listen to Mormon Stories, I think it's just fair to note the church used to be in favor of polygamy. Now they're not. The church opposed the civil rights movement, or many top prophets and apostles opposed the civil rights movement. Now they like black people and are okay with blacks voting and crazy things like that. The church opposed the Equal Rights Amendment for women, and we know that was wrong. The church, has opposed homosexuality and same-sex marriage, and many of us know that they were kind of on the wrong side of history. Do you see? Maybe we're coming to a close here, and maybe I'm being a little bit over dramatic. We've got polygamy, we've got civil rights, we've got LGBT people, we've got women.
Yeah.
Do you see this issue about legalization of cannabis on that same level in terms of its import? I don't want to overblow it, and feel free to say, no, it's not that important. But is it super important for you, this issue? Or is it just good for business and kind of a nice thing for humanity?
I mean, nothing really in my mind compares to the destruction and the evilness of slavery and then later the civil rights movement. I mean, that to me was so inhumane that, you know, it's hard to kind of rank it anywhere near that scale. But I do think as a society, we don't understand and we haven't taken the time to really be thoughtful about the negative implications and consequences of prohibition. And it's easy for a, you know, high income, older man sitting in Utah to think about how it would impact his world. But think about the people who are being imprisoned in inner cities. Think about the people who need access to medicines that they may not be in touch with or know about, right? We need to think beyond our own little bubble and think about the pervasive, unintended consequences of making this illegal and the millions and millions of lives. In 2016, something like 650,000 Americans were arrested for possession of marijuana. That in and of itself should be alarming. I mean, that is a massive amount of people for simple possession, not dealing. And so we need to really understand the implications and make positive changes. And so, yeah, it's hard for me. I'm kind of dodging your question. It's hard for me to put those in relative rankings, but it's much bigger than I think what people generally associate with marijuana. People joke about it. It's fun. It's a new topic. Yeah. Everyone wants to smoke weed or whatever. But when you go underneath that and dig a little deeper, you'll find that there are massive societal implications.
Yeah, everything from the incarceration of people of color, the focus of law enforcement on things that are less important at the expense of other things that are more important, the prison systems, the cost of the judicial systems, the war on crime, how that affects other countries in addition to our own, and then the prohibition of healthy medicine that can really be useful to people.
Yep.
And, you know, the way that limits or encourages the use of other less healthy or safe drugs like opiates and alcohol and other sorts of things. So
one of the more surreal moments I've experienced since being in this industry was just a few weeks ago when my aunt called me and asked me to help my great aunt who had a fractured hip, had just lost her husband and was really dealing with some health issues. She said she was desperate for something to help her relax, to move, to reduce the swelling in her hip so she could take a bath and walk. And I took her a whole bunch of different oils and said, okay, let's figure out what will work for you. And she was open to using cannabis. An 89-year-old woman who's been a devout member of the church her whole life and just an absolute angel of a person, most beautiful person you can imagine. And that was one of those moments where I went, wow, things are changing. Our society is changing. You know, to have this woman be willing to use these medicines, it was great.
I should have mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the Utah Medical Association statement. I have heard from multiple people, friends of mine, who go to doctors in Utah. These are Utah physicians, Utah Mormon physicians, and they'll say, off the record, you should be using medical marijuana for the treatment of X, Y, or Z condition. I can't tell you that officially. Don't quote me. But if you can get to Colorado or get to Nevada and get some medical marijuana, this is absolutely the best treatment I could offer you for the condition you're in, whether it's degenerative, bone degeneration, whether it's nausea, whether it's epilepsy, or whatever the conditions are. So many Mormon Utah physicians know about the benefits of cannabis, but they don't feel that they're able to talk about that openly.
Very common in the medical community. We hear that a lot. We put on monthly seminars. We have a doctor that works for us, puts these on, and we get doctors who show up. We have a Parkinson's support group that shows up, and I love having that conversation. I love hearing that from people. I wish they had more knowledge and more facts to share with them, but that's changing.
All right. Well, is there anything else that we should have covered in this discussion about cannabis and marijuana, or did we cover it all.
Oh, we've never covered it all, but I just am super encouraged by the discourse, by what's happening. I think, if people pay attention to this kind of subversion of the ballot initiative, that's a red flag. We need to address that. But no, I look forward to seeing how this plays out in Utah, and I want to be a part of it. I want to help. I want to happy to do tours for anyone visiting from Utah, especially legislators and others who just want to see what a dispensary looks like, what products we sell. Hit me up, find me online, and I'd love to help be a part of changing our perceptions.
Really quick, Mike is asking about psilocybin. I've heard about people using MDMA, which is sort of the active ingredient in ecstasy, as I understand it. And then you hear about the cactus-based hallucinogens like
San Pedro.
Yeah, and that's also known as...
you might be thinking of ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca.
Yeah, that's a vine, actually. But
that's a vine. And then you've got LSD and mushrooms, which is psilocybin, right?
Correct.
What do you want to say about those types?
Do you really want to open up that?
No. I'm just whatever you want to say. What do you want to say?
Man, that's a whole nother discussion.
And you can say, let's not talk about that now.
No. I love this. This is my life. I love talking about these things. There are many compounds classified as psychedelics that have shown to have enormous medicinal properties, but they're very much misunderstood in our society today. And I think, we would be well served to kind of take note as to some of the research that's being done, especially in Johns Hopkins regarding depression, end of life, treatment of depression, PTSD, all kinds of issues that Roland Griffiths at Johns Hopkins is studying with the use of psilocybin. And I just think in general, I'll make a general statement, John, and then you can ask some follow-up questions. I just think we should be more open-minded, right? The war on drugs has failed. Our labels have failed us. Our categorizations have failed us. And let's be more open about the things that we can contemplate and use responsibly to help increase our quality of life. And when it comes to PTSD and depression, for example, the compounds in magic mushrooms, psilocybin, have been shown to have enormous positive impacts on people, even after taking them under clinical watch for only 2 or 3 times. So I just think we should be open to it. There are a lot of different traditions and medicines and techniques and tools out there that I think in Western society we've kind of excluded from the list of options. I think those need to be on the options list, and we need to be talking about them.
All right. Well, this has been another epic. I think this is probably going to be a 5-hour...
Holy crap. I'm so sorry, all you
5
people.
or 6 hours, I don't know, but I'm sad Allison can't be here to close.
Yeah.
But how's business? Just economically, how's the business? Is it?
Well, that's another misconception about cannabis, is there's this green rush going on that anyone who's near or around the cannabis industry is making gobs of money. And that hasn't been my experience yet. I'm fortunate. Our business is thriving. We have an amazing team of people that I get to work with every day. But I'm not retiring tomorrow. Okay, we're just paying the bills right now. The cost, the economic cost, the time, the energy to start one of these companies and really get it flourishing is much harder than most people, I think, realize. Under the medical only days, we were basically break even. Today, under recreational sales, we are turning a profit, but most of that money is being reinvested in the company to help fund our growth and hire more people and do better things.
So business is okay, but you're not filthy rich.
No, and that's not even the goal.
It's competitive, right?
Here.
It's competitive.
It's
business.
very competitive. You were still competing against the black market. I would say 2/3 of the marijuana demand in Nevada is still being met by the black market. So we've supplanted a lot of it, but we have a long ways to go. And the regulatory costs are incredibly high. We have about 258 pages of regulations we have to follow. And we have to pay enormous taxes. So I don't want to sound like a whiner, but it's hard to run one of these businesses. The compliance alone is very costly and very draining. And so, it's not true that everyone who's in the industry is crushing it and making tons of money. There's a whole nother IRS issue that we could get into in banking and other things. It's a challenging industry, but I think that's the price to pay for being a new entrant in such a new, field and new industry. But it's still worth it. It's still fun.
All right. And just to be totally fair, drive this point home maybe one last time.
Okay.
My guess is your view wouldn't be everyone should smoke as much marijuana as possible
Absolutely
all day
not.
long.
No.
It has risks, and it's something to be very thoughtful about. True.
We joke about it a lot. People in the community joke about it. There was a time where the family was still going to church that I had this dream, this fantasy that I would bring a big, cookie sheet of brownies and at the church function and say, brownies provided by Andrew. That we like to joke about stuff, but the reality is it is a drug. It can have negative consequences and side effects, and it needs to be done the proper way, the proper amount, in the proper setting. And, we need to make responsible decisions. No one in the industry wants to see mayhem. No one wants to see kids being hurt or traffic accidents or anything else. We want to see this done above board in a responsible way, just like we treat so many other actions and products that have potential negative consequences in our society. We actually have a very high tolerance for that. Hell, lawn darts used to be legal, right? We've shown that we can responsibly integrate things that have negative consequences, and marijuana has potential negative consequences. We just need to be cognizant of them and work through them and have an open dialogue about it.
Brilliant. Well, I just want to thank you and Allison for coming on Mormon Stories. This has been a really powerful day for me, and I've learned a ton. And you guys inspire me.
Thank you, John. You inspired us first before we inspired you, and it's truly an honor. It's been hard. Today's been a long, hard day because of so much pain that comes out when we talk about these things. But at the end of the day, like Allison said, if our story can help someone, give someone a little bit of encouragement, it's worth it for us. And we're trying to practice vulnerability and kind of making ourselves a little more accessible. So thank you for the opportunity.
And I just want to thank everyone who has been joining us today at various parts of the interview. It's been fun to have your comments and questions. We love streaming these things live. We're grateful for everyone who tunes in. Really quick, if you want to be notified about from Facebook for these interviews, first of all, you need to like the Mormon Stories podcast page. That way it's going to pop up and tell you when these interviews are occurring live. But you also have to follow the page, and there's a setting under Facebook where you can sort of say notify first or as a first priority. If you do all those things on the Mormon Story podcast page, then you'll always be notified when a live interview hits. But please do like our Mormon Stories podcast page. Please give us a positive review. We always have kind of people who want to see us not do well, who go on and without even listening to the podcast, they give us negative reviews, give us 1-star reviews. That brings down our average rating. They do that both on iTunes and on Facebook. So please go to the Mormon Stories podcast Facebook page, like us, follow us, and give us a positive review if you can. Please go to iTunes and log in and give us a positive review for Mormon Stories podcast on iTunes. We only have a 4.5 star rating on iTunes. We should have at least a 4.9 star rating on iTunes, but baddies have given us bad reviews. So please give us positive reviews on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. We really appreciate those who donate to the Open Stories Foundation that make all this possible. If you are a donor to the Open Stories Foundation right now, take your arm, right or left hand, and pat yourselves on the back for making this possible. If you don't donate to the Open Stories Foundation, we love you. We're grateful that you tune in. Please become a monthly donor. Go to mormonstories.org, click on the right-hand top right button of donate. Become a $10 a month, $25 a month, $100 a month donor, whatever you can afford. This is a great way to pay tithing to the universe with whatever tithing funds you have. We really appreciate that. All our donations are tax deductible in the United States, and We're transparent in our finances, and all of the money that you pay goes to supporting me and the staff, Amy Grubbs, Tim Corey, our new hire. We now have a new hire in addition to Amy Grubbs. We have 3 full-time employees now. Watch the Open Stories Foundation and Mormon Stories grow. We're really excited to have Tim with us. Tim's been a great hire, and this is because of your support. We've got so many cool projects in the works, and we can only do it with your financial support. We still have Cody Layton helping us. We love Cody and Sharon Price helping with events. So please continue supporting us. And all the money that you donate to the Open Stories Foundation and Mormon Stories goes to our core mission, which is providing people resources, information, community, support for people either experiencing or impacted by a religious transition. We're saving lives, we're saving marriages, we're keeping families together, and we're helping make the world a better place by helping people base their lives on reality instead of things that fall short of reality, and to base lives on evidence-based, healthy choices instead of sort of non-evidence-based dogma or fiction or fantasy or sometimes bigotry. So please support the Open Stories Foundation. Thanks to those who do. We want to give a special shout out to Christian who has been helping us all day today. He volunteered and helped us, and we're really grateful. We're just really grateful to all of you for tuning in. Please let everyone know about this podcast. Please share it far and wide. I think the interview with Andrew and Allison is going to save marriages, so share that. And then share this discussion about medical cannabis or marijuana. We want to make sure that Utahns do the healthy thing, and we want them to be informed. If someone decides not to support, the medical marijuana bill, that's fine. That's your choice. But make that decision with all the information. Take Andrew's experience, which is evidence-based, data-based, experience-based sort of feedback, and have that factor in. Share this with everyone you know in Utah, and let people know that the LDS Church is trying to subvert the legislative process and the democratic process in Utah. Let people know that, as we understand it, the LDS Church is paying lobbyists or activists to decertify a ballot initiative that has gone through all of the states in Utah and has received the adequate number of signatures, as I understand it, to let this be on the ballot. The LDS Church right now, this month, is trying to decertify that ballot to keep it off that petition to keep it off the ballot so the voice of Utahns cannot be heard. Raise this issue with your legislators. Raise this issue on Facebook and on social media. Call attention to these backroom practices of the LDS Church so that we can sort of have Utah make the healthiest democratic choices and not be unduly influenced by the biases and prejudices of a religious institution that shouldn't be meddling necessarily in the affairs of a sovereign state. So thanks for joining us. Tune in again for more cool episodes. And then finally, don't forget that we have several upcoming events. We have Angela Soph, the singer, coming May 17th in Utah. Go up to the mormonstories.org/events to sign up for that event. She's a brilliant, wonderful musician who has written this wonderful album about her faith crisis, and you guys are going to love the song. The songs there, especially the song Rocks, I think it's great. Boise, Idaho, May 18th and 19th, we're coming to you. Please let everybody know. We want to have a good 40 people attendance at that workshop. We want to save marriages, make people happy and healthy in Boise. We also have a 2.5-day retreat in Salt Lake City. It's going to be in Park City, actually, June 8th through 10th. We're really excited about that. Those retreats change lives, save marriages, save lives. So sign up for that retreat. Get your partners to sign up. Get your friends and family to sign up. You will benefit. It's all about navigating a faith crisis, healthy, positive mental health, navigating relationships, saving marriages, healthy sexuality, raising children, communicating with believing family and friends. That's what we do in these retreats and workshops. We're coming to Salt Lake again in June. And then July 13th through 15th, we'll be in Houston, Texas with Sam Young, with Natasha Helfer Parker. Same as in June. So come to that, let people know about it. And then finally, we're scheduled to do something in Idaho Falls, August 10th through 11th. And the Mormon Stories Cruise in October. But if you want your own workshop or retreat, we want to come to Ogden, North Utah, We want to come to Colorado again. We've had interest in Chicago, in Minnesota, in different parts of California, in Florida, DC area. If you want Midwest, if you want one of these events to come, all we need is a good idea that about 30 people, 40 people are going to attend. Help us get the interest in your local region or area. Go to mormonstories@gmail.com or staff@openstoriesfoundation.org. Let us know that you want to bring a workshop or retreat to your area. And Amy Grubbs and Sharon Price and Tim, Corey, and I will make it happen. So please team with us, and we'll bring all this goodness and wisdom to every area that wants it. So thanks again for joining us. We love you guys. Thanks to everyone who makes this happen. Take care and tune in again soon for another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. Bye, everybody.